Well, Atlantic City has been responsible for producing and presenting some great names in entertainment, and also for being a launching pad for some show business careers. But in this case, it launched the king of comedy. Hi, everybody. We're in dressing room A at Merv Griffin's Resorts, and Alan King joins us when we come back right after this. Backstage at Merv Griffin's Resorts, Alan King joins us. Alan, good to see you.
Thank you, David.
It's been quite a while. You haven't worked the stand-up circuit in a few months now.
Well, yeah, but you know, I took a couple of months off and worked. I'm doing a book, my life, you know, my memoirs.
Now, what was it? Now, what's the title of this thing?
It's called "The Hooker in Cleveland is Dead."
I told you that was the title. The Hooker in Cleveland is Dead.
Yeah, well, you know, my first book was called "Anyone Who Owns Their Own Home Deserves It."
Right.
Second one was called "Help I'm a Prisoner at Chinese Bakery." The third one was called "Is Salami and Eggs Better Than Sex?" So I decided that even if it's my memoirs, you know, I might as well give it. But the story in the book is about the hooker in Cleveland is dead. You see, and it was a story about my coming of age many years ago at the Mounds Club.
Wow.
With Joey Lewis, but it's very traumatic, you know, when you start writing, living your life again.
You're living your life out now on paper and on tape.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who it was. I asked years ago. I said, "You going to do an autobiography?" And they said, "Nah, I think I'd rather live my life before I write about it."
Yeah.
You feel it's time now?
Well, I don't know. The Scribner thought it was time, you know, but you know, when Joey Lewis saw Frank Sinatra playing him in The Joker is Wild, right, with all these beautiful women, Joey Lewis said Frank had a better time playing his life than he had living it. You know? But it's kind of weird. It's really traumatic.
It must be like self-analysis, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Only instead of laying down on a sofa, you sit at a desk or whatever, and you dictate.
That's exactly right. It goes into a tape recorder, and I'm working with a wonderful writer, Chris Chase, who wrote the Josephine Baker story, mm-hmm, and Betty Ford, and on and on and on. And before I decided upon a collaborator, I wanted somebody who was a good writer, but when I said Joey Lewis, I didn't want somebody to say, wasn't he the heavyweight champion of the world? I wanted somebody that, in a sense, had some historic, mm-hmm, background about my business.
And you do go back, what, 50-some years?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Since you
Great
started.
Great fun.
And this is really where my career started. The Steel Pier was owned by a man called George Hammond. He was an Arab and about as nice a man as you could have. A little fellow with a pencil mustache. I'll never forget it. And I auditioned for him. And I didn't get the job. And as I was walking out, obviously dejected, Mr. Hammond came over and he said, "Hey, kid," he said, "what are you going to do this summer?" I said, "I don't know." He says, "Come work for me." He said, "You're not ready for the stage, but you got a lot of guts." And what I did for one summer was stand in front of the General Motors Pavilion at the Steel Pier and announce the greatest attraction this town has ever known, including with Sinatra and Julio Iglesias. Forget about it. It's called the Diving Horse. Now, I have a whole chapter devoted to this act. Why anybody would see a goddamn horse jump into the Atlantic Ocean. You never saw anything like it. It was beyond comprehension. I used to stand out there with a sailor swirl and a white flannel and a double-breasted blazer, and I would announce the eighth wonder of the world, high atop the cruel Atlantic. People would line up for miles, pay a quarter. The whole thing took 10 minutes to see this horse dive into the Atlantic Ocean. I used to say to myself, "Drown, you son of a bitch." What do you mean, no? You want to see this horse that had plugs? They used to take them from the front of coal trucks. They used to put a cinch, you know, like a girdle around the horse, and they used to crank him up 60 feet. There'd be a drum roll. Then the owner would take an electric prod, shut up the and the horse would jump and let it go. Why are you looking at me, lady? You don't think a horse would jump 60 feet into the ocean unless they shoved an electric prod up his. You jump 60 feet in the Atlantic Ocean if they shoved the electric prod. Look how she's looking at me.
We captured on tape you reminiscing about how you started in Atlantic City. Did you ever have any idea when you were standing outside the Steel Pier.
Right. With the diving
With
horse.
the diving horse. And they didn't use a cow prop, but that's okay. I mean, it makes the joke funnier.
Yes.
But, Alan, for years you have always defied the notion that you are just a stand-up comic. You're much more than that. You've directed things over the course of your career, both on stage and on screen. You've produced, executive produced motion pictures and TV shows. You've been a philanthropist. You've appeared in front of the camera in movies. You were with Billy Crystal in Memories of Me. A general, all-around, raconteur, I believe they call you?
Well, yes. The answer to your question is yes. I had the guts of a lion when I was a kid. I didn't have very much talent, but I had such desire and such drive. And there were so many people who kind of, not kind of, but, encouraged me and helped me along the way. I couldn't do it by myself. Mm-hmm. But so that was the fun of growing up, from playing with the Steel Pier with Benny Goodman, and playing here with Ina Ray Hutton and Billy Eckstein, and the Paramount Theater with Dorsey and Sinatra. And all these people were good to me.
And yet you still seem young enough to sit down with a Robin Williams or do a picture with a Billy Crystal and almost come off as a contemporary.
Well, I like to think of myself as a contemporary. And the people that you mentioned, see, I'm not sitting around at the Friars now bemoaning my fate. I've had a very good career. Mm-hmm. My career, I'm busier now than I've ever been.
And there are guys younger, let us say there are guys younger than you who will sit at the Friars Club all day long and I used to be, I could have done
but the young people today, you mentioned Billy Crystal, Robin Williams.
Right.
What I admire, besides their obvious talent, is the fact that they have a feeling about the history. A lot of young people figure they got up one morning and invented comedy.
Right.
Billy and Robin, and it goes on and on. They know that there's a tradition. They know that there were a lot of guys that made it safe for them. It's Jackie Robinson making it safe for black ball players and I, my icons, my heroes, Burl and Benny and Burns, all did it before me, making it easier for me. And I'd like to think that perhaps my generation made it a little easier for these guys.
And you sit down with them and you get into a conversation, and like I said, it's like your contemporaries, though. They don't look at you as an elder statesman of comedy, and I bet you don't feel that way, though, either, do you?
Well, I do at times when after a couple of martinis, like my oldest son said to me the other day, he said, Dad, you just told a story for 40 minutes and there aren't anybody in the story that's alive.
And so you're getting older.
Oh, yeah.
When no one in the story is alive.
Yeah, I know. But it's been fun, and it is fun. I mean, I haven't worked, as I said, tonight, if I didn't look at my watch, I'd have been out there for another hour.
That's funny because I was sitting back here with Bob Chambers, the entertainment director, and he said, when you went into the enema story, Bob went, oh my God, he's going to get off on time.
On time. Well, because I do have a responsibility to management.
Right, of course. You worked the casino circuit for so many years. You were a regular in Las Vegas, and then you haven't been there for a while, have you? I mean, they had a tennis tournament out there named
for 20 years.
For 20 years.
Yeah.
At Caesar's Palace.
Yeah. And sad part of it is I just buried Vitas Gerolaitis at 40 years old, who came to me, when he was 18 years old.
I wanted to talk about that also. You are a regular at the U.S. Open. Oh, yeah. I think that in another life, you would have preferred to have been a tennis pro.
No, not really.
No? Had the money been better? No?
No. You see, it's like I can enjoy music and painting without wanting to be a composer or a painter. I think I inherited this. I know I inherited this from my father. My father was a devotee. He was an immigrant, couldn't speak the language too well, but he was a man of great knowledge and many interests. And I think he instilled it in me and in my brothers and my sister, what he called the good life. He said, don't get carried away with Benny Goodman. Benny Goodman's good, but sit down and listen to Puccini. You see? Mm-hmm. or and the great thing about growing up during the Depression in New York, I've said this many times, I've said everything many times, but growing up poor in New York was a blessing because there was so much available to us that was free. The Museum of Natural History, Museum of Art. The first really good music I ever heard was the Goldman Band in Prospect Park, you know. So, you know, it didn't cost anything. There's so much that, and yet even today, there's so much that young people should and could take advantage of. There's great art out there.
And they don't, though.
Well, a lot of them do. A lot of them do.
Is that why you've chosen to remain in New York all these years?
Yes, I do. I'm a big city guy, and I can't take LA, although I have my best friends and I'm there all the time. My business, my company's out there. But as a people person, I like to walk around New York, and I know, you know, not only New York, but every urban center is littered with crime and, you know, homeless people. But it's where I can still feel. You know, I don't have to go to bed every night saying, hey, look at this. You know, I'm in a 4-poster bed, and someone's brought me, you know, a brandy. I like big cities. I always have.
I don't remember very much about the Lower East Side because I'm told that my family moved, things got better. Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president. There was the NRA and the WPA, and I was a child of the Depression, obviously. And now all of a sudden, you know, I was one of 8 children, 7 boys and 1 girl, and we moved from the Lower East Side to waterfront property in Williamsburg and Brooklyn. Location, right between the Bond Bread Factory and the Schaefer Brewery. And to this day, if I ever eat bread and drink beer, I develop a yeast infection.
You know, you mentioned that you just buried Vitas Gerulaitis. You were quite close to that young man. I think you first met, long before he was even a junior star, right?
I took lessons from his father. He was 13 years old, and I was taking lessons from his father, Vitas Gerulaitis Sr., and he said to me, I want you to take a look at my boy. And it was this, you know, he came to see me at the house, and I looked down out of the upstairs window, and I said, what a very attractive young lady is coming down. This skinny kid, he was about 13 years old, with the long hair. And now that I'm a golf nut, you know, I can't play tennis anymore because my knees are gone. If they'd let me play tennis in a cart, I'd still be playing tennis. But Vitas, everybody, he became such a golf enthusiast. And
I remember you were working here while Vitas was briefly employed here for like 2 years as a goodwill ambassador.
Those were the bad years.
Those are the bad years, yeah.
His bad
years, and people really weren't aware of it. He kept it pretty well quiet at the time.
Well, you know, I said it.
Did you know it at the time?
Oh yes, I know it.
Okay.
And his mother, whom I adore, and his sister Ruta, and when he fell off the wagon a couple of times, I went down to Florida to see him, you know, and Fred Solly, who was the great Australian champion, and his coach. And but he was maturing. He had, you know, he had never reached his potential as a tennis player, although he was 3 in the world. But
he admitted the drugs and the party probably kept him from being #1.
And but he was becoming a real adult, mature. He was doing CBS, ESPN.
He was an excellent commentator in the U.S. Open.
A great kid, and it's been a. You know, when you pick up the paper, I had, you know, Julie Stein passed on at 88. Great, but had lived the big life.
Right.
Arthur Krim, this is in 1 week, head of, you know, United Artists, a giant in the film industry, in his 80s. But when you
expect that.
Well, in a sense, you know, but when you think of a kid, and on the other hand, you know, from some crazy accident, it just seems wasted.
No doubt in your mind it was an accident.
We know that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to happier subjects. You've had a very unusual movie career over the years, and that sometimes you've been in front of the camera, and other times you've been behind it. You were the executive producer of Wolfen, weren't you?
Yeah,
among other.
Yeah, that was the one that almost.
That one.
That was close. Yeah,
Near miss.
I produced a lot of pictures. You know, I love doing stand-up.
Right.
But I never thought or felt in my early years that it was enough for me. I always wanted to reach out, stretch, and I couldn't just good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and then become lay on a couch, watch the television, smoke a cigar, and wait for the next gig. So that started early, and, that's when I started writing and producing and then directing little shows around before it was called Off-Broadway. But I needed it, and I still need it. I need it. It's my food. It's my it's what I live on.
Well, it brings out the creative side of you that you can't get out on a stage, I would imagine.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, and as I said, I haven't worked it, but standing out there for an hour is still that's it. That's still the big joy. Oh, sure. That's where I'm Toscanini and Lenny Bernstein. I'm conducting the orchestra, the audience. I'm out there. There's no phone calls.
But it's only for an hour. Yet, if you're doing a movie, that can go on for weeks and months.
But that's difficult. That's for a movie.
That's work, huh?
There's no creative juices while you're making a movie. It's only great concentration and great discipline. But fun, not very much. But it's what we do. Broadway, the Broadway stage is a great, great treat. But I did a play for a year. I was marking the calendar like I was in jail. I got 82 more performances. So
because you have to stick to that script,
right,
you can't go off the book.
But stand-up. Now they have a new word, stand-up. When I was a kid, I was known as a monologist. Or you did your act in one. That's meant in front of the first curtain. But that's where I really do get my biggest kick is standing up there.
I don't think I've ever seen you tell a joke per se on stage. It's just a series of stories that are
Well, there are a lot of great storytellers. There used to be words that they used to use, monologist, and then the other word was raconteur, But it's storytelling. Only, with all the lies that I've told on stage over the years, as long as I can make the audience believe it for the moment, they become involved in it, And that's what it's about, is having the audience. See, when I sit there and watch a lot of the young comedians, and the opening line is, "Where are you from?"
Where are you from?
Who cares? How about good evening, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, to me, where are you from indicates someone who really is not prepared to go out there.
Or maybe there's no continuity because he may do his shtick or she may do his shtick, and then in the middle said, "Are you all right?" I say, "Oh, here comes the continuity, the bridge." But the fact is that the young people have been exposed on cable television before they were ready for television. For the few that made it, there are a lot of them that were exposed too quickly, too early.
They had a great 7 minutes, but that was it. They couldn't go beyond it.
So, that's, I knew this. I mean, every comic, guys, they were funny at the water cooler, and they went into one of these, and then all of a sudden they did 7 minutes. They got on Carson or Letterman or whatever the show may be, and the next thing you know, they were doing a movie and directing the second movie.
Alan, with the proliferation of comedy clubs around the country, and I'm kind of wondering, is it really a proliferation? Because I think they're starting to close right now. But at all things being equal, with all the comedy clubs out there, is it easier for a comic to get a break today, to get the break today, than it was, say, 50 years ago when you were coming up?
Well, easier, yes, but were you able to sustain? When I went on stage the first time, let's say there'd be a team that did the rumba with the big sleeves and a water glass on the head, and they'd do cha-cha-cha on the rumba. And then there'd be some sort of juggler, and then the comic, and I would go out and do 8, 12, 15 minutes, and then the star would come out. So I was the only comedy in the show. Now you go to a comedy club, there's 10 comedians
Right.
back to back. Well, after the sixth, I mean, what else is going to happen? I think it's tougher to sustain, but easier to get into the business.
I remember 15 years ago, before there were comedy clubs, you couldn't put two comics on the same bill.
I tried. I did. I went on tour. I went on tour a couple of years, a lot of years ago. Tony Fields opened for me.
Oh, Jesus.
And we played, I don't know, we played about 16 weeks. And everybody said, no, and it was wonderful. You know, it was wonderful. Well, why not? Tony came out and did 45 minutes. There was an interval. And then, it was, now, of course, we accept it. You know?
Right.
But I think it's tough when you got 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 comedians, one after another.
You better have different styles coming out there, because if you have the same type over and over,
You better be pretty
you better
good.
be Robin Williams or Billy Crystal. We don't see too many talents like that coming along more than once in a lifetime. I think you did the movie, What Memories of Me?
Yeah, I played Billy's father.
With Billy. Billy was a doctor, and you were a screen
I was
extra,
an extra,
right?
yeah.
You were an extra.
I love doing
the king
that
of the
film.
extras.
I love doing that film. It's so funny, because I'm doing a film with Julie Warner, who played Billy Crystal's wife in Mrs. Saturday Night. So when they called me on the phone and said, Julie Warner, it plays your daughter, I said, no, I'm her father-in-law. And they looked at me like I was crazy. I said, she was married to Billy Crystal, and I played Billy Crystal's father. In fact, it happened to be in 2 different pictures. Still makes her my daughter-in-law.
That's your daughter-in-law. Before we go, real quick, you're doing the movie Casino with everybody.
Marty Scorsese directing, De Niro,
Pesci.
Joe Pesci, James Wood, Sharon Stone. And I got a call this morning that really made my day. They said that Don Rickles is playing a dealer.
Really? Now you two boys play nicely.
Look what I have to look
Look
forward
what you
to.
have to look forward to. Hey, Alan, good to
Thank
see you
you,
again.
David. Thank
Welcome
you.
back to Atlantic City.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with Don in the movie.
What really upset me is having to relive my life again. And that's what it is when you sit there with a tape recorder and a young woman, very fine writer, Chris Chase, who's working with me. And all of a sudden I sit there and I have to think about it, So I thought what I would do tonight is I'd start at the very beginning and literally go through my life for you. I was born on the 25th of December. That's right. Not in a manger, but on the Lower East Side of New York, which was about as close as you can get to a manger. We didn't have any geese running around the apartment, but my mother always had a live fish in the bathtub. I remember that. Does anybody remember? My mother always had she used to wash all the kids in the kitchen, but the goddamn bed, they had this carp swimming around. The sitting in the toilet was like the aquarium, Whoop, whoop.